Hello, children, and welcome to the British Raj and the First War of Indian Independence. So, let's do a quick time travel to the past and see what led to the British invasion and how they ended up ruling our country. And several hundred years ago, the Arabs and the Europeans traded with India. They traded mainly over land. And India back then was a very rich country and it was very famous for its spices, gold, pearl, and silk. So these were some of the things that was abundant in India and people traded with India for all of these goods. So this picture here represents some of the spices. Gold, pearl, and silk, I'm sure you've all seen. The first European who found a sea route to India was a Portuguese trader by name Vasco da Gama. This is Vasco da Gama, and he went around Africa and landed up in Calicut, which is in Kerala, over 500 years ago. So if you see, this was the route he took. He came from Europe, so he went all around Africa and finally he ended up at Calicut. Then, at this time, because Vasco da Gama came in, the Portuguese trade began with India through a sea route. And mainly, Portuguese dealt with the trade of spices. So, they bought spices from India. And soon, along with the Portuguese, followed the Dutch traders, then we had French traders, and finally, the English traders landed in India. But soon they started fighting with each other to get a bigger share of the trades themselves because there was limited resources. Everybody wanted the maximum share of trade. So they started fighting amongst themselves itself. But the British defeated all other traders and they formed the East India Company in the year 1600 for trading with India. They made trade centers in the western and the eastern coasts. And for some time, they concentrated only on trading, but things worked out to be different later. So, this was the East India Company that was set up, and the East India Company mainly bought spices and textiles from India. So, this was the main trade that they took part in. So, what do you think led to the East India Company controlling whole of India? Let's talk about the British control and how they gained control over India. When you see British control, the wealth of the East India Company was actually used to fund the industrial revolution that happened in Britain. And the British now needed a steady supply of raw materials for their factories back in Britain, and they needed a market where they could sell all of these finished goods. But soon the British weren't just content with having a trading relationship with India. They actually wanted to control whole of India. So nearly 250 years ago, the Mughal Empire began declining and several regional kingdoms started merging to become one. And the very smart British took advantage of this constant fighting that happened among the kingdoms and they started gaining control over India. So this was the first mistake that we did. And their first conquest of India was at Battle of Plassey, which happened in 1757. So this is the Battle of Plassey, which happened in 1757. Now, in this battle, the British defeated Siraj-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Bengal, and finally gained control. This is Siraj-ud-Dawla, and they became very powerful in Bengal. And soon, in the next 100 years, they extended their control over whole of India. So you can imagine how just one battle was enough for British to gain control over whole of India within just 100 years. Now, because of the British rule, there was a lot of discontent among Indians. Let us see how. There was a widespread discontent among Indians because of the British rule. The officers of the East India Company used very unfair methods to become rich, and they did so at the cost of Indians. So, how did they do this? They saw that farmers of India were forced to grow cotton and indigo. What is cotton and indigo? These are two crops here. So this is cotton and this is indigo. Now, these two are not food crops, they are actually commercial crops, and these actually provided raw materials for the British factories. So, this wasn't good for India. Actually, they were making Indians prepare raw materials so that they can take it back to Britain. So, they forced farmers to grow cotton and indigo, and the British bought these raw materials at a very low price, as a result of which farmers became poorer and poorer and the British became richer and richer. And with this, the milk cloth made in British factories was sold in India. So they took this cotton, went back to Britain, made the milk cloth, and bought it back again to India. And if you notice, this milk cloth was actually cheaper and of better quality than the local weaver's cloth because it was machine made, there was consistency. And because of this, the local industries and the weavers suffered a lot of losses and they started becoming poor. Not just this, in fact, even the traders suffered because of these goods that were coming in from Britain. So, if you see this, this is a British mill where cotton cloth is being made. Now, apart from this, the British also made very unjust laws which could take over more and more kingdom. One such law was that if a ruler dies without a child, then his kingdom will be taken over by the British. What do you say, children? Do you think this is fair? How can it be fair, right? The kings and the Nawabs of India became very unhappy because of this. And this led to a revolt and uprising where people forgot their differences and fears and started to rise together against this kind of injustice. And because of all this injustice, many Indian farmers, workers, traders, everybody were angry and dissatisfied. So, because of which, when such situations arise, there is a high chance of revolt and an uprising. So, because of this, people came together, got united, and started the fight. This led to the first revolt, which is called as the First War of Indian Independence. So the revolt of 1857 was called as the First War of Indian Independence. Now before the revolt started, there were several months of tension among the Indian soldiers. Why? Because of new rifles. This tension was because of new rifles. So why did the new rifles really give so much tension? The thing was that there was a rumor that was spread. In order to load these rifles, they had to bite off the end of the cartridge, and there was a rumor that spread that the cartridges or this rifle cartridges was greased with the fat of cows and pigs. So this angered both Hindus and Muslims because cows for Hindus was very holy and for Muslims they consider pigs as very unclean. So this angered both Hindus and Muslims. On 29th March 1857, Mangal Pandey, who was an Indian soldier, attacked a British officer near Calcutta. So this angered the British a lot. And on April 8th, 1857, the British hanged Mangal Pandey. So this is Mangal Pandey here. This is Mangal Pandey, an Indian soldier who worked for the British. And on 10th May 1857, Indian soldiers in Meerut actually shot down their officers and took control of Meerut. So once they did this, they started marching towards Delhi and persuaded the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah. This is Bahadur Shah, the last Mughal emperor, to take lead of the revolt because they needed a leader, right? So these Indian soldiers who were very unhappy and very angry went and requested Bahadur Shah to take lead of the revolt. This revolt spread widely throughout India. Different leaders led the revolt in different parts of India. And some of the prominent leaders are Nana Sahib, Tantia Tope, Rani Lakshmi Bai, and Liaquat Ali. So all of them are right here. So we have Nana Sahib, we have Tantia Tope, we have Lakshmi Bai, and we have Liaquat Ali. So these people all started coming in together to protest against the British. But Unfortunately, the British had far superior weapons and greater military strength than the Indians, and many Indians also cited the British. There were quite a few Indians who supported the British, who did not want the British rule to end. And that is why the revolt of 1857 was known as the First War of Indian Independence, but it was crushed by the British. However, it did alarm the British of what Indians were actually capable of. And in 1858, the rule of East India Company ended because clearly it was creating a lot of revolt among Indians. So the Queen decided that they will end the rule of East India Company, and a viceroy was appointed to rule over India on the behalf of the crown. But though the revolt as such failed, many people were inspired by the bravery of those who fought against the British. It made them realize the injustice that was being done to them by the British and the value of freedom and how valuable freedom is. That is when they realized. And they realized if they stand united, they could defeat the British and gain independence. So, this is how people of India started to realize that whatever the British are doing is wrong and we should fight for our independence. So, with this, we complete this chapter. Let's do a quick recap of all that these people went through in order to fight for the freedom that we enjoy today. We spoke about how European trade started in India. We saw how the first European trader to set foot in India was Vasco da Gama. And soon we had Dutch, French, and English traders who came in. And English traders established the East India Company. And we spoke about how these English traders were not just happy with trading, they wanted to gain control. So the first conquest over India they made was through Battle of Plassey, which happened in 1757. And because British gained control over India, there was a lot of discontent among the Indians. Because firstly, they made Indian farmers grow only cotton and indigo, which they would take back to Britain, and they made milk cloth and brought it back to India to sell it at a higher price. And also, they made very unjust laws which said that rulers who don't have children, their kingdoms will come under the British rule. So, all this really brought a lot of discontent among Indians. And finally, this led to a revolt in the year 1857, which we call as the First War of Indian Independence. And this mainly began with Mangal Pandey because of a rumor that was spread saying that the rifle cartridges were greased with cows' and pigs' fat. And then Mangal Pandey attacked a British officer on 29th March 1857 at Calcutta, and he was hung on the 8th April 1857. But this gave inspiration, and on 10th May 1857, some Indian soldiers took control of Meerut by shooting the British officers there and requested the Nawab to join them. And finally, in the year 1858, the rule of the East India Company ended and a viceroy was appointed to take care of governance in India. So this is about the first struggle that the people of our nation did to make sure that we have a free country. If you have any doubts, get back to us. If you like the video, hit the like button and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.